Il a mis le verre sur la table. Il a mis la bouteille du vin à côté du verre. Il a mis la coupe capsule sur la bouteille. Avec ses mains, il a tourné. Il a pris le tire-bouchon. Il a enlevé le bouchon et il a reposé le bouchon sur la table, sans me parler. Il a levé le verre à son nez. Il a respiré les arômes. Il a siroté le vin. Il pensait, sans me parler, sans me regarder. Il s'est levé. Il a mis son chapeau sur sa tête. Il a mis son manteau de pluie parce qu'il pleuvait et il est parti sous la pluie, sans une parole, sans me regarder. Et moi, j'ai pris ma tête dans ma main et j'ai pleuré.
Ooh, look at me. I'm Alex with my pondering French tones. Can we stop this and drink some bloody wine, please?
Ah, mais oui, mais oui.
May we what?
Maybe drink some wine, of course. Tonight on the Online Wine Tasting Club, we go to France and don't drink any wines made by him, or by her, or them, or him, or this guy, or this woman, or this dashing gent, or this nice lady, or even this splendid songsmith. In fact, it was quite hard to find 6 wines that weren't owned by celebrities, but we did it. So come join us as we go on a tour of this beautiful region with 6 wines made by winemaking superstars instead. It's time for the Discover series, Wines of Southern France. Good evening, bonsoir, and a very hello, my little British chums. I've been wanting to do that since I saw Jean-Paul Gaultier and Antoine de Caunes saying that back in the 1990s. Giving my age away here, aren't I?
Don't remember it.
Oh yes, you can try that. But anyway, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you here as we go on a tour of a pretty fun part of the world. Again, south of France.
Absolutely. And I think what's great about the south of France as we dive into it is there's some world-renowned regions that make some absolutely spectacular, stunning wine that people have heard of. Provence, Côte de Rhone, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, that kind of stuff. And then there's all these kind of fun little pockets in between and around. There's Minervois, there's Corbières, there's these little places that don't always hit the headlines. And
no.
I think that's a little bit of fun. So yeah, we're going to do a little bit of a tour. We've got white, we've got red, we've got rosé, we've got all kind of things. However, I would apologise, but I don't really want to apologise. We've got a couple of absolutely phenomenal interviews today. And unfortunately, phenomenal interviews take...
They tend to go on a bit. And
they go on a little bit.
We cut them down from 2 hours.
And when I try and cut it down to where it needs to go, there was too much good stuff in the first interview.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to put wine number 1 and wine number 2 in the glass.
And wine 2.
We've then got a little bit of a video about south of France and what we're going to go through today.
Yeah, put together by a remarkably beautiful and intelligent lady. I'm allowed to say that, aren't I? It's my wife, so thank you, Naomi.
So it'll be a step up from what people are used to.
Well, exactly. But yeah, we've got a little video, talks through a bit of the history, a few of the regions and, some of the things. But it's hard because this is a massive, massive region. And anyway, we could go on about it, but the video will probably give a bit of an introduction. So grab the rosé, wine 1, and wine number 2.
So wine number 1 is our rosé from Provence. We'll get that in the glass.
It had to be done. We had to start off with
While I
Provençal
pour these, do you
rosé.
just want to remind everyone how to get into Poly V and put their tasting notes? and all
Yeah,
that
for
kind of
sure.
stuff in?
So just down the bottom here, this little link. I'm getting better at this weatherman malarkey. That is the link that you can go to on a phone or a tablet that you've got spare if you want to enter your tasting notes for wine number 1. And then we'll flick it on to wine number 2 just after we get back to the studio to hear what you think of the Vermentino, which is also known as Rhone. Yeah, these are 2 quite different wines, but they're in that nice, light, fresh style that the south of France is so famous for, because what more would you want to drink on a bright, wonderful, sunny summer's day such as now? But we're going to hear a bit about how rosé shouldn't just be drunk on the terrace.
Exactly. But so these 2 wines aren't designed to be side by side to pair with each other. It's just because we've got a little bit of a long interview. We don't want anyone to go thirsty. So without further ado, let's get to the video and put your questions in the chat.
Sounds good, yeah. We're in the chat. Speak later. I have many happy memories of holidays in the south of France in my youth, and wine is, perhaps unsurprisingly, close to the heart of many of them. One of my most vivid memories was visiting cooperatives in Provence and picking up delicious wine for less than €1 a litre from a petrol pump. That is right, you could take your pick of white, red or rosé, bring your own reused container and just fill them up. And litre for litre it was, even literally cheaper than petrol. For me, the south of France was definitely most associated with incredibly cheap, drinkable table wine, and perhaps the home of the refill movement and the reuse of containers, which is something we're only just starting to engage with here in the UK. But for those who moved in slightly different circles to me, it was much more about Bordeaux and the Rhone, which attract some of the highest premiums in the world. Nowadays, the wines of Provence, having become the cause célèbre of everybody from Brad and Angelina to Jeremy Clarkson, carry very high prices too. But there are still so many areas in this vast region which are often just kilometres away from the famous names, which fly completely under the radar and offer incredible value for money for very similar wines. So which is it? What exactly is the story of the south of France? Is it too hot to make truly elegant wines? How can one small region have such a dramatic contrast between the reputations and the prices commanded? Well, as such a large, varied region with too many grapes to count and even more tiny sub-regions, this is a very good question and one that's well worth diving into. France is a story of history, tradition, hierarchy and rules. Lots of rules. To try to maintain the status of the famous regions, rules were put in place that were very rigid, aiming to preserve the quality and to prevent cost-cutting by disreputable winemakers who would, over time, potentially erode the reputation of the wine. And that is all well and good, but it can be very constraining. In visiting this part of the world, we hope to explore what the different sub-regions have to offer, some famous and some less so, where you can find great value alternatives to the big names, but to also talk about the constraining effects of those old rules on winemakers, and how we should not be scared by wines which don't use these famous regions' official names, instead choosing to call themselves by the less specific Vin de Pays label, such as the Vin de Pays d'Oc, or even the very non-specific Vin de France name. These used to be things definitely to avoid if you were looking for a quality drink, but now winemakers are not just using them to cut costs, but instead they're using them so they can fully exercise their creativity, learn things from around the world, and to make really exciting, different wines. And the final thing, of course, we're going to look at is the climate, because, unsurprisingly, it varies quite dramatically from the Mediterranean Sea and the west influences from the Atlantic, and of course up into some quite dramatic mountains in the Pyrenees. There are even some incredible valleys which channel aggressive weather down from Central Europe and beyond. Peter Mail's description of Le Mistral, the freezing cold wind which rips through the region each year, will stay with me perhaps throughout my life. So we have a lot to get into and of course a huge number of grapes to focus on. Even more so than usual, it's been really tough to pick 6 wines to tell the story. But on tonight's little tour of the south of France, we have to start in Provence. Not to spend a year there, as attractive as that sounds, but to talk rosé. Next, we will move on to Languedoc. Langue in French means tongue or language, and this refers to the classic region of France which spoke a very different variant of the language, one where instead of saying oui for yes, you would say oc. Now this region still has a hangover from the time, with the pronunciation being very different from what you might have been taught in school. Instead of being served du pain, du vin, du boursin, everything seems to end with an eng. Du pain, du vin, du boursin, as it were. The area has a very strong individuality, and it has long been a hotbed of political protest. In fact, angry winemakers started a revolt in 1907 protesting against the import of wine, and this resulted in the death of 6 winemakers. The terroir is classical Mediterranean wine country with wild landscapes and vines stretching in every direction. But the biggest challenge for this, the world's largest winemaking area, is that during the 1980s, 10% of all the wine made in the whole world came from here. But the focus was on quantity, not quality. Today, it's trying to remodel itself from thousands of unprofitable vignerons making dubious quality wine into fewer, making the kind of good quality that the soil and the climate are clearly capable of. And at the heart of that rediscovery is this rebellious nature. And it's fair to think of the area as France's answer to the New World. Traditionally, the French wine system is supposed to follow very strict hierarchies in order of the size and quality of the land or terroir. The smaller, generally the better. You'll hear of these controlled areas as being called appellations, which just means what it's called, and contrôlé, which means controlled. The smaller and more prestigious, the stricter the rules are to preserve quality and style, so you know what you're getting. The trouble is that with that controlling set of rules, you really are forced to make things the same, even if you happened to have found a way to make it better. So while that name can carry a good price advantage, it means more competition and it's harder to differentiate. That is immensely frustrating to a modern winemaker. So what you now find increasingly, especially here in the rebellious south, is that alongside the traditional wines being made to these AOC specifications, there are lots of other wines being made under the Vin de Pays regional labels, or even a Vin de France label. In a Vin de France wine, pretty much the only limit is the grapes have to be French, and many of the less well-known AOCs have found very limited value in their regional brand. So for wine number 2, we explore a Vermentino, which has picked that middle ground, the Vin de Pays d'Oc label, which covers Languedoc and Roussillon. Here we have what we think is a beautiful example of how simplicity and elegance can showcase amazing quality, but with a different style that happens not to tick the boxes to get the better name that they could do if they had followed all the rules. Next up, for wine 3, we hone in the Picpoul de Pinet region to drink a Picpoul de Pinet? Confusing? Yes, okay, it's the name of both the region and the grape. The region itself sits between the beautiful port of Sète, which is known as the Venice of the Languedoc, and Cap d'Agde in the south, which is today more home to an infamous community of swingers. The vineyards are based around the Bassin de Tau with its pink flamingos, and Pinet is the town at the centre of the region. To try to give a real identity to this area, the only grape that can be used is the traditional one, which is also sometimes called Picpoul Blanc. Now, Picpoul has grown massively in popularity in recent years. It's generally light, fresh and crisp, and makes a brilliant alternative to Pinot Grigio or a Sauvignon Blanc. But this particular example again shows what happens when a bit more care is taken and the wine is left on its lees. That's the yeast that was used to ferment it, to age for a few months. That gives it real texture. For wine 4, we move to Corbière, which is the Languedoc's largest AOC, covering everything from the Cathar lands near Carcassonne with its fine castles, some of which were defended to the death against the Catholics.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
It goes right down to the sea as well at Narbonne and Fitou. Red wine dominates here, making up almost 95% of the produce, and Carignan is the most common grape variety. Due to its size and geography, Corbière encompasses an enormous variety of soil types and microclimates. The wines from the region therefore tend to be just as varied. It also experiences incredibly different winds. For example, the dry Atlantic vent serre frequently brings cold weather from the northwest, while the area is normally under the influence of the warm Mediterranean vent marin. Now here Jamie is doing his utmost best to confuse me, because while we are in Corbière, not Picpoul, we are drinking another variant of the Picpoul grape, the noir or black version here. This one is from Fontrachère, and we went to chat to their head winemaker Vincent about the winery and the region. Moving northwest towards Bordeaux, we head to Cahors for wine 5. This is perhaps the most famous of the sub-regions of the southwest of France and is the ancestral home of Malbec, now of course more associated with Argentina, having been brought over by travelling French winemakers. It's also the home of incredibly rich fatty foods like foie gras. These wines have been loved internationally for centuries, but were more known for a rougher, inkier and more tannic style of wine than is found in South America. But the wine tonight is a rare beast, a project from an Argentinian travelling winemaker who reversed the usual trend and came back to make wine in France, using what they'd learnt on the other side of the Atlantic. Finally, we head back east to finish off, of course, in the Rhone Valley, and we are in the southern half, famous for its blends, trying the wines of the Famille Perrin, who also own the legendary Chateau Beaucastel in Châteauneuf-du-Pape and Tablas Creek in California. Tonight, we taste the Nature organic blend to round out our tasting of southern France. There are, sadly, a load of regions we will not get a chance to look at tonight. If you happen to like great value traditional method sparkling wines and some sensational Syrah blends, take a look at Limoux. There are great producers like Gérard Bertrand in areas like Saint-Chanian and Terrasse du Larzac. The area around Bergerac is increasingly also producing high quality wines on the banks of the Dordogne, not that far from Bordeaux. And if you like a good dessert wine, but can't quite spin out for the Chateau d'Yquem, go to Montbazillac. For now though, let's focus back on wine number 1. Despite its place in the history of winemaking with vineyards dating back as far as 600 BC, Provence has remained very much in the shadow of more prestigious areas surrounding it, but sales of rosé are on the upswing, growing faster than any other style of wine. Once again, pink is chic, and Provence is the benchmark. Ambitious, stylish and wealthy immigrants are drawn to the legendary countryside and climate, and many have reinvented Provençal wines. An increasing proportion of its rosé wines are gently made, intriguingly perfumed, and dry enough to be perfectly paired with the garlic and olive oil which characterises the region's cuisine, plus the pine and herbs that grow near the vineyards and contribute to the terroir. Most today are a blend of Grenache, Mourvèdre, Cinsault, Syrah and Counoise grapes. Provence, however, has also been seeing a deluge of celebrity owners and so-called winemakers. Clearly this is a double-edged sword which has drawn attention from the best and most traditional wineries, but which has increased the region's popularity and global appeal. Jamie got the chance to talk with Barbara from Chateau de Rouet about blending, Thanksgiving, and why rosé is not just for the summer.
Talking about the Chateau du Rouet, it's a family business since 1840, old established estate, 6 generations that have succeeded each other. We work on about 90 hectares of vines, producing 600,000 bottles, mainly rosé. This is, of course, a tendency that is quite new the last years, because in the past we also produced red wines and we do produce white wines, but today it's about 75% rosé. The estate is has existed since very long because we are totally autonomous in water. We have 2 sources which allows life, especially in Provence. There's little water, so it's very precious to have 2 sources, 2 springs. Our terroir is built up on a volcanic soil. This is very important for the character of our wines. It's the red rocks of the Esterel mountain range. So this gives mineral wines with a lot of body. We, of course, grow the typical Provence grapes, Grenache, Syrah, Cinsault, Tibourin, Mourvèdre, and in white, Uni Blanc and Rhone or Vermentino. The blending of the wines, which is an obligation in Provence, the wines have to be blended. They're never varietal wines. It's one of the reglementations. So the idea is to have a light, delicate rosé with a lot of fruit, but dry. We are, for instance, for the Esterel, we're under 1 gram of sugar. So the wines are dry, but very fruity. So this would be typical for the Provence wines. The idea is to keep a light color. So the techniques are more and more modern. And today, when we harvest at night to have the grapes cool when they arrive and to avoid oxidation. So they arrive at the vinification cellar and they are cooled down even more to extract a minimum of color once they have their skin maceration. It's like washing a pair of blue jeans. If you wash them cold, you will not extract a lot of color. And if you wash them warm, then you will extract the color. It's a little bit the same idea. The difficulty is to extract a maximum of aromas, even though we're not extracting too much of the skin and the color. That's the delicate part about it. It's actually quite difficult to make a good rosé.
Do all your grapes get vinified separately and then you make the blend, or do you bring everything in them? Yeah.
Exactly. And we're actually very excited because on the 10th, the next week, we will be blending the wines, which is the crucial moment of the year for us. And the surprising thing is that you can have two middle quality rosés that will be just fantastic when you blend them. It's chemistry. It's just chemistry. Or you can have two very good rosés that will not be, won't have a very nice reunion. So but of course with the experience when we blend the wine, so as you said, we vinify separately by grape variety, then we taste around 50 different vats, and then we imagine, and this is also a question, of course, of experience, then we imagine the blends that would match, and then we try them, because if we tried all these different possibilities between these 50 vats, it would take us weeks. But by experience, we know that certain things will match well. It's very light. It's a very light color, slightly onion or salmon colored. The idea is, you have to know that Cinsault, the grape variety, one of the grape varieties in this wine, will give this color. If you yes, we can do that. If you, for instance, take Syrah, you will have more pink, purple reflections. Whereas with Cinsault, you will have a beautiful rose petal salmon color. And the interesting part maybe, and that is very typical for our terroir of volcanic origin, is that the wines have a lot of length, a lot of volume. They're, as you said, not flat. They can proudly accompany any meal, but also just be drunk on a terrace. Actually, this wine, Esterel, fits very many different meals.
There's been a huge amount of kind of like marketing behind some of like the bigger name brand, the Minutis and the Whispering Angels and the celebrity-led Provence wines. What are your thoughts on that? Does that kind of make it not about the winemaking anymore, or does that help to get people to know about the region globally? Does it help your brand or hinder your brand, or not really one way or the other?
Very good question. I believe that it is something positive because as I said, we're a family business. We're doing really well. We produce about 3 million bottles altogether, but here at the Chateau, 600,000. So we've been developing also. And of course, as we live from our production, we're very happy that others communicate and do marketing in a very fantastic way, which is of course positive for all the wines of Provence, absolutely. And the little story is that the Chateau d'Esclans, Whispering Angel, is our neighbor.
Oh, okay.
And their winemaker is the twin brother of our winemaker.
My other question is, we talked a bit about versatility, but I really want to cover the point of rosé being a year-round kind of thing. I'm a big fan of rosé kind of like around Christmas time with turkey and stuff like that. But what are your thoughts on rosé and being more than just outside on the beach in the summer?
Oh, I totally agree. But we're convinced we've been consuming rosé wine all year since always. And I totally agree that a rosé, a very nice, full-bodied rosé, can be a perfect match to a Thanksgiving dinner, or for Christmas, or for New Year. You can match it beautifully to fish or to lamb also. And I totally agree that it's not just an easy drinking, light, tasteless rosé, but wine. It's much more complex and much more delicate than its reputation has been.
Hello and welcome back. I hope you're enjoying these wines. These are, it's very interesting. Provençal Rosé has now got such a premium price point. And when you're talking about other wines, like you're talking about Bordeaux, generally speaking, it will be about a single vineyard that was declared by God himself that this is the best vineyard and the best winery. With rosé, it's a blend, and it's coming from lots of different sites, some of which are lower down, nearer to the sea, where they get that sort of slightly more moderated temperature, doesn't get as hot, doesn't get as cold, and others are way up in the hills, and these are the foothills of the Alps. You're getting terrific cold winds coming down from the Alps. But how do you define what is an expensive rosé and what isn't? Now, a lot of it, I think this is perhaps why it's the perfect wine for these celebrities, because so much of it is done on taste and branding. And there are a few people who are saying, I think there's someone who put in the note that it was a bit forgettable, but I think we got more in the sort of region of strawberry, candy, lime, citrus, lemon. And obviously there is this big thing, I think someone said savoury. Provence is very, very proud of its fields of lavender, of its herbs, the Alpe de Provence and the pine trees, all of which put this, you breathe it in. If you've never been, it is an extraordinary place just to go and breathe in the air on a warm day, just a mist of all of these different flavours and scents in the air. And of course they get onto the berries and they get into the press and they get into the wine. So it's much less fruity. There's practically no sugar in any of these. It's by the rules of the appellation. You can't put more, you can't leave it with more sugar in. So they're all very dry, very acidic, and you're always going to get these subtler flavours. But how do you make one worth more than the other without it being a fancy bottle or these kind of things?
I think a lot of it comes down to who's making it and what's doing it and the quality of the wine.
Yeah.
They're blended from all over the place, but as with anywhere, there are better sites, worse sites, things like this. But because Provence Rosé has to be a blend, you don't get single variety.
Yeah.
It's always a blend, and it is this Grenache, this Cinsault, this Tiburon, these kind of grapes. It depends on the person by person, but there's a lot of people down there who are, buying vineyards, celebrity names and stuff like that. And it doesn't always mean that it's a lesser quality or a better quality. But, the more people it has to touch and the more people it has to pay, the more expensive the bottle of wine is going to be. And I think that's an important thing to look. You look at these brands across anything, wine, cars, spirits, bags of sugar, energy drinks. If you're paying someone or someone's there with this kind of star power,
this is definitely a made wine. But the other thing about these is that the grape varieties they go from. Some people bring in Syrah, some people put in Cabernet Sauvignon. These are vastly different grapes. They do give different flavours. It's just that it's very subtle because they try to limit that contact with skin. Anyway, that's enough about pink wines. Let's have a talk about Picpoul de Pinet that my father has just messaged me saying, don't you remember that we were drinking Picpoul de Pinet in Picpoul de Pinet?
I was going to talk about the Vermentino first.
Oh, the Vermentino. Sorry, yes, you're quite right. We've got that one first, haven't we?
I'm
jumping the gun.
He's got too excited about rosé. He spent all his time on rosé, and now he doesn't want to talk about anything
okay,
else.
Vermentino. So when I first tasted this, I would have said this was Italian. And of course, Vermentino is the Italian name they give the grape.
It is, and it's sometimes called Vermentino, sometimes it's called Rhone down there. Once again, you see this a lot in blends, and not very often as a single varietal in the south of France. But this is the joy of having these different AOC versus IGP versus Vin de France rules. Is it allows people to grow some different bits in different places and do what they want. And this is Costa Tal, which is this big, massive water in the eastern Languedoc. So you get these moderating temperatures because it's like. Well, it's basically on the ocean and basically by a lake at the same time. So you've got lots of water,
flamingos,
but really good for irrigation. You get good ripe fruit. So if you've got warmer years, you're not suffering from drought. So you're not always going to get the most intense of flavours, but you're always going to get nice fruitiness and richness and ripeness and all that kind of fun stuff.
There's a little bit of salinity coming into it as well, which is probably from the proximity to the sea, but it's primarily these really big fruit flavours: pineapple, grapefruit, pear, those really developed fruit.
Gummy bears. I like gummy bears. Gummy bears.
Should we pop the tasting notes up?
Yeah, let's pop the tasting notes up.
Okay.
So I like gummy bears. And what I've seen a couple of times, I've seen it in the tasting notes here and I saw it in the chat as well, nostalgic. The south of France, people who have been there kind of get it. And it's these like litres of wine here, carafe of wine there. Just sit. It's, this Vermentino I really, really like. I think it's good. It's easy to drink. It's got a little bit of texture. But it's not something that I'd write 27 pages of tasting notes about. It's just nice. And you want to
delicious.
Be there in the place and drink it. And this is made by a cooperative, so it's lots of different growers bringing these grapes together to create this final wine. And it's made especially for one of our importers, so it's made to fit a style. It's not one man hand harvesting 2 rows of grapes and doing this. It's brought in to create this fresh, easy drinking.
But as you can tell, there's a skill in
wine.
There's a real skill in that because you're bringing together all these different component wines, and yes, it's all Vermentino, but they'll have come from different growers, and you're putting it together to make this final wine, and it doesn't. It therefore has got the complexity that's given people to give, a huge number of different tasting notes, and I think that's really cool to see. So
very quickly before we jump on, Hannah's just asked. She says stupid question, but I agree.
No such thing.
I agree that it's not a stupid question because you said it reminds you of Italy. When I tasted it, it reminded me of France, but that's because I picked up a French bottle of wine. What makes you feel Italy when you do that? And you've got 30 seconds to sum this up because we're going to go drink some peat bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a taste memory thing for me. It's the kind of thing that I can have had on occasions. You're so annoying. He's so annoying. Anyway, it's the kind of wine that I've just had on those occasions where I've been eating a pizza out in a piazza in northern Italy, and that's where they grow it. That is where they grow that stuff.
Good.
Anyway,
Fantastic.
So it's just muscle memory kind of thing.
Oh. Andrew's ahead of the game. He's a 3. He's on 3. Andrew's on 3. So
okay, let's have some wine number 3.
3. Also, while I pour wine number 3, just a shout out to Phil Webb on the Twitter, who's got a lovely setup with some beautiful glasses and hopefully some beautiful wine. So thank you for popping that up and sharing that you're tasting along with us. We like doing shout outs.
We do. Definitely. If you've got a birthday or anything, we'll do that. We'll do that. But yeah, so this is a Picpoul de Pinet.
From?
Picpoul de Pinet.
Tastes like?
Picpoul de Pinet.
Nice.
And not like wine number 2. Although wine number 2 is from...
Close enough to being.
Pretty much. So as we said, that lake that's slap bang between the nudist colony and the beautiful city of Sète...
Also includes Picpoul de Pinet?
It does indeed.
Fantastic.
But this is the real deal. This is the whole Picpoul de Pinet from Picpoul.
You say this is the real deal because I think there's a lot of people out there are getting into Picpoul de Pinet now. It's that nice kind of, I like Pinot Grigio, I like Sauvignon Blanc. I want to try something a little bit different. And Picpoul de Pinet is usually this bright, fresh, crisp style of wine, and it usually comes in this tall, skinny, green Riesling-looking bottle, embossed glass. This does not.
It does not. So I'm guessing that's not part of the rules of...
So this does a little bit different. So these guys make your, I don't say standard, but the Picpoul that you might expect from the world. But this is their, I don't know what to say. It's kind of like they're single plots. It's a single plot, single vineyard, single area. And what they do with this is they do a little bit of lees aging. Not for a long time, but just for about 5 months. As the winemaker, do you want to explain lees aging very quickly?
I'm guessing there's lots of people who've been with us before, so sorry if you've heard this before. It doesn't matter. It's a stupid techie term. We don't like stupid techie terms. But basically, after the fermentation has happened, you get all of the yeast, which did that, sits down at the bottom. And if you stir it up, it looks like this lovely creamy juice that's in your barrel suddenly, and it gives, as the yeast breaks down, it gives this wonderful texture to the wine, and slightly getting into sort of flavours of sort of breadiness or pastry, and so that's certainly a bit of what we're getting on that one.
No, it's an interesting thing because lees, there's a lot of people that sometimes go, oh, that tastes like it's been in oak, and it's not, and it's lees gives this kind of, when you get oak, you get more of the kind of like the vanilla and the butterscotch, and when it's lees aged, it's more of that brioche kind of and real. And I say it's a leftover yeast, so the yeasty kind of flavour. Yeah, some great.
But biscuit, that's another classic one for this.
Biscuit, yeah.
It's almost like a Scottish shortbread biscuit that for me, and I've just got back from Scotland, so that's kind of at the top of my memory. But yeah, I think that's really, really quite different and quite a lot more complex than your typical pickle.
Shells, but yeah, acidic but creamy, and that's you can have them. You can have both of those things because you've got this beautiful, beautiful acidity from the freshness of the fruit that's got this zippiness about it. And once again, I don't know. I'm going to have said more now. Lees aging or Pipo de Pine. It's a bit of a, but you have that, and this is what's really important about wine is having this balance between richness, acidity, fruit. And for me, this is a wine that you could sit and drink a couple of glasses of quite happily. But this is a proper cheeseboard wine.
Yeah,
something like Manchega, something like an aged cheddar with when you get that kind of like crunchy salinity in a cheddar, something like that with this would be absolutely beautiful.
Yes, please. Well, you've got a question.
I have a question that there's some people have put in the chat that we've just seen that they're picking up a medicinal note. Why could that be?
Medicinal note. I mean, it's not one that I'm getting myself, so it's hard to sort of say. Let's do a bit of looking into that one just while we're.
The only thing I could think, and I'm not picking it up myself, but I don't really pick up that. And I think I might see what you said, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier.
Pseudoephedrine. That's very specific.
Down in Provence, there are all these kind of like herbs and the lavender and that kind of area, and people talk about this like garrigue kind of thing that gives this kind of like medicinal, almost like a TCP-ish kind of feel to it. But I don't pick up too much of it myself. No. But this is the joy of this, is each of their own. So everyone can chuck your taste on those things because we don't all
It's not saying it's not there. Absolutely not. What we're saying is that whether we're getting it or not, and that's all you can ever do with this.
Oh, Gouda.
He's going to say it.
I'm not going to say it.
No. You don't need to.
You can put my joke in the chat. Someone else can do that for us. So yeah, we're looking honey, cream, biscuit,
Let's get the tasting notes back up. There we go. Yeah, honey and biscuits. Now, that's not a bad thing to have, is it? It's sort of the sweetness with biscuits. It's taking me back to that sort of Italian tasting that we were having as well. But I like the idea of the sort of the lychees and nougat that you're getting there. That definitely is coming through to me.
It's just good wine.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's just good wine, and the joy is, would you generally wander down a supermarket and pick up a bottle of Lees aged Pipo de Pine in a non-Pipo de Pine bottle?
Even it is from La Croix, sweetie. Oh no, Gratia, that's it, sorry. I think we might have put a typo into the heading of the tasting book. Sorry about that.
Did you not proofread your French?
Well,
too busy writing poems. So my apologies for this poetry writing.
What can I say? It wouldn't be a French tasting without a dark, moody poem to start things off. But there we go.
Look at that!
At least it means we don't have to sing this time.
I like this. We've got people sharing wine with vastly different tasting notes, and that's epic. That's really kind of cool. Right. Should we drink
Shall we
some?
drink on some? Let's have some red, shall we?
Okay, but before we do that, let's drink some more peak-pole.
Yes. So, yeah, it's a. I was joking. I joked with Joe the other night. It's like, is this actually just a peak pool tasting? But no, this is. There are, as we've talked about in other tastings, when you get a change of a tiny mutation in the grape, which changes the colour of the skin. So, like from Pinot Noir to Pinot Blanc, or Pinot Blanc then to Chardonnay. These are completely different flavours you get. It's absolutely crazy. So this, I don't think I've had a red Picpoul or Picapol.
So this is mainly peak-pole, and what you'll see is this time it's not a typo. Fingers crossed, unless I've made a typo on a typo. Depending where you are in France, and depending what region, you have peak-pole spelt with P-I-C-P-O-U-L-E.
Yeah.
You've got it with the Q-U in there, and you've also got it like this guy here on the label, Picpole, which is what the original term for the grape was. I think this is cool. This is a cool drop of juice.
Well, I mean,
So
it's just while we're talking about these different words, it's because we talked briefly in the video about the Languedoc, this other language that was there. But also there is another dialect that was specific to Provence, and that's a kind of a cross between French and Italian and some other things, Spanish thrown in there as well. And so you've got some quite different languages going on. So you'll see signs in different languages still down there today.
Absolutely. So this is 70% Picpole Noir and 30% Carignan. Carignan is that main grape from Corbière. So we're Corbières now, yeah. And I just think this is, it's the biggest AOC in the region. They make great wine. They make cool stuff. And they're one of the few that they're having issues fighting climate change right now. We did an interview, and I'll get more of the interview up. We spent about 30 minutes talking about climate change and how that's becoming a problem.
Yep.
They grew a lot of Syrah there, and now the Syrah is ripe and ready to go in the middle of August.
Yeah, far too early.
Which is far too early.
When you say it's ready to go, it's like the sugar is ready to go.
The sugar's ready
the flavors
the flavour's not there. So it's ripe. Yeah, it's ripe in the middle of August, which is no good for anybody. No. So they're trying and changing, and they're trying to do some different bits and pieces. So they've got about 160 hectares under vine, of which some is done under Corbière's AOC, like this is, and then they do some other stuff where they're growing different grapes under the kind of the IGP rules.
Yeah.
But I had a chance to talk with Vincent, so we should probably probably pop to that, and we'll see what I had to say about.
Yeah, pop your tasting notes in while we're doing that,
and keep your questions coming in the chat.
Take care.
So I am the enologist and the winemaker from Chateau Fontarèche, as well as the global manager. Chateau Fontarèche is a 130 hectares estate in the very eastern part of Corbière. You probably know Narbonne, the Roman city. And we are located something like 15 kilometers towards the west, towards Carcassonne. And Narbonne is making part, Fontarèche is making part of Narbonne landscape since more than 1,000 years, because it was the property of the church. For one main reason is that here we have a good grave soil, sandy soil with good availability of water. And the monks were very happy with the soils we have here, very rich and easy to crop. In the meantime, it's a river bench, so we have pebble stones, making this soil not for wheat, but very adapted to the vine growing. So the more recent story is the one of the family Delamy, owner since 1682, and they made this chateau unchanged since during 500 years, 400 years, meaning that we have a perfect square around the chateau, more than 2,000 hectares, 200 hectares, I mean. with 140 hectares of vineyard. So what makes Corbière different or a place to visit is first the size. From Carcassonne to Narbonne to Perpignan, you have a kind of triangle representing the surface of Corbière, which is very huge. In this area, you have 10,000 hectares today of vineyard, but it used to be much more. But more than vineyard, it's a very, very big area where you can get lost easily and where the history is present everywhere, thanks to the Chateau Cathar, thanks to the old villages witnessing of wine activity in the past centuries. We do have wine and vineyard everywhere, but to be honest, Corbière is not as active as it used to be.
So I think what's interesting with what we've got, Corbières, and going a little bit further south, because obviously you've got certain grapes that you can grow to be Corbières AOC, and from what I gather, you grow grapes as well that just go under the Van der Pey label. Is that correct?
Exactly. We do. We have
does that help a lot? Because you're seeing, we touched on global warming, and it's a fact, it's happening, and we know, Bordeaux have just changed their rules a little bit and allowed some more grapes in for blending and stuff like that. But with, you look at what, and I don't want to say the more famous regions, but globally the more famous regions, Burgundy, Bordeaux, they're kind of stuck with their AOC rules as to what they're allowed to do and what they do. Have you found with growing, obviously the Corbière is great, but then also the other ones, more flexibility, and it's been able to kind of keep up a little bit with the change, with having different grape varietals and seeing what's happening?
Yes, this is an excellent question. To answer rapidly, no, we don't have much flexibility in the Corbière appellation.
Yeah.
And this can be seen as a pity. And has an incapacity to adapt to the temperature, to the climate. So in the Corbière red, to give the red as an example, we have 4 main grape varieties: Carignan, Syrah, Mourvèdre, Grenache. Which represent close to 97% probably of the appellation. And you perfectly know that the JSM is also used in Australia, for example, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre. And when we are in Narbonne, with the Roman influence everywhere, you can be a little bit upset knowing that in Australia they are using the same blend. So you have Picapole. Picapole is the name of Picpoul Noir, the name we used to use in the Languedoc before phylloxera time. So it's a family Picapole. Picapole rouge, Picapole blanc, Picapole gray or rosé. You have different names: Picpoul, Picapole, with the accent of the south. So the first mention in our region is from the 16th century. And it was described as one of the most Mediterranean grape variety. And who described it like this? The agronomists from the 2 centuries, and from the 16th, 17th, 18th, remaining on that position of excellent cépage de cuve, meaning grape for wine, not for eating, for its enologic advantages and strengths. So we do know that it was a key grape on that on that time. So my family, we work in the enology since my grandfather. And when I arrived 15 years ago in Fontarech, my father said, Vincent, you have 4 hectares of pigpool noir in Fontarech, and you really should have a look on it. Nobody tried and recently to grow and to make vinification with this grape varieties. So let's see. And in the first time in 2018, I tried for the first time to make whole grape fermentation with Picpoul Noir. The color, it's another parameter. It can be surprising to have such color, ruby color, not so deep. And when you see the grape, you see that the polyphenol, the color is not all around the berry. You see some pink rose parts, some parts more red, and it's a mark, it's an identity of this grape variety. It's a pretty light color that can surprise, but it can be more gourmand. When you look at the glass, you have this ruby color, and then the wine is a bit loyal to this color.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely insightful. Great to learn a little bit more about Corbières and the winery and Picpoul Noir. So thank you very much, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon.
Welcome back. Now, there's some very interesting, this is quite a divisive wine, which is why we love these sort of things, because there's some interesting stuff going on. And somebody made a very, very astute statement, which was that they didn't feel like the...
Was it you?
No, it was not. It certainly wasn't me. But the smell and the taste didn't quite feel connected. Now, if you've still got any of this left, have a smell of this and see if you can cast your mind back to the dizzy old days when you used to drink... before we all learnt better, sorry, I've got a bit of a bias against it, when people used to drink Beaujolais Nouveau. Now, for me, that's first thing that I got
next week,
hit,
mate.
It's next week,
I
it's
have
coming
plenty
up.
coming for you, a couple of pallets.
Do you?
Yes.
Great.
Straight to your house.
Yeah, so that nose is not my favourite, partly because I don't massively like sort of fake cherries, that kirsch-like smell that you get from it, and I also really hate bananas, and there's a definite hint of banana on that on the nose there. But when you get into drinking it, and it's not the aromas that are coming off it, I think it's really nice. But yeah, not my favourite smell. And so we should probably say, because someone's inevitably going to ask, why does it taste like Beaujolais when it doesn't? Why does it smell like Beaujolais when it doesn't taste? And that is down to the winemaking techniques. And he touched on it in the interview slightly. He said they use a lot of whole berries. And basically, that is the technique that Beaujolais uses. They leave the berries whole to ferment in a different way, and it develops those kirsch and banana-like flavours. Dan's got a question.
I have a question from Hannah. Would this get better with aeration?
So that...
Well, the
is
smell
a good
would
point.
go. Yes,
So it's
sure.
interesting because in the deep depths of my my interview with Mr. Vincent, we talked about this. We talked about this. Aging in bottle, and because it was an old grape and now it's come back as a new grape again. There's not really any history of it being aged to see what it is. But he did say that he'd had a couple of glasses and he'd left the bottle just hanging out 10 days, just with the corking done. Came back. No difference.
Really?
The wine was in good nick. It wasn't oxidised. It wasn't whatever. So I think...
Whereas with some of the rosés, you hear tales of people having 2 glasses, and by the time they go to the third, it's gone.
It's a new colour.
Oh, we have a top tip for rosé. Why can't we get off rosé? It's covered in southern France.
What's this?
Don't keep them in the light, because the light, you get ultraviolet in the light, and that hits some of the flavour molecules if they're in clear glass, and it turns that into the flavour of cabbage.
So I should drink them.
So if you really love the flavour of cabbage, leave your rosé in the sunshine. If not, try to keep it in a cupboard. That's my top tip. But that's not relevant to that.
So, but getting better with a bit of aeration, all wines, will, with a bit of air, will mellow out, and some of the more pronounced flavours will drop away of it. So It depends. If there's kind of like a really prominent kind of like spicy flavour that you're not a fan of, give it a bit of air and that will dissipate a little bit.
Yeah.
And therefore for you it will get better. If you like that banana spice, chewy, cool stuff,
smoky thing
like I do,
on. Yeah.
leaving it and giving it air, it's not going to be any better.
No.
For me, I like it straight out of the bottle, but it's the same with anything. You
It's
know,
true.
some wines, a bit of air, it will definitely change the wine, but whether you prefer that or not prefer that, that's a personal preference.
Let's get on to wine number 5 because I want to drink something else. Not that I didn't like this, but I wasn't a fan of the smell. But
Not that you didn't like this, but you didn't like this.
A little bit, yeah, kind of. I can't like everything we do, you know. We're only human. This now, we are going up to Cahors, which is the home of Malbec, the absolute home of this grape. But as we discussed in an Argentinian tasting, there is more of a genetic diversity of Malbec grapes over in Argentina now. So it's really interesting to see what they have learnt on the other side of the world and are now coming back and bringing those learnings and probably, I'd imagine, some of the clones, some of the different types of Malbecs, because Malbec's a family of different grapes. There's lots of different variants of it. If they're bringing those new ones back to it, and, you know, here it is, Malbec's coming home. And
I'm not singing.
He's not singing. We should move this on to the next one so that we can do that. There we go.
Yeah, I never got
Wine number
tasting
5.
notes.
I'll turn that off so we don't all see each other's tasting notes. But yeah, there are lots of people talking about glugging. Now, we used to go on a holiday to around Cahors, just a little bit, one of the tributary rivers of it, and
We're just going to have a section every week.
Alex,
Alex's family snaps.
okay, all right, but this is a good one. All right, so your big village dinners, and they all bring out a starter of some nice onion soup. Everyone from the village comes out, singing, dancing, party time. You have your onion soup with your croutons and your cheese on top, absolutely delicious, and people are drinking red wine. You get to the end of this, all of the soup has gone, and everyone in the village starts doing a kind of funny drinking game where they take their local red wine, which tasted probably not dissimilar to that, but a bit more rustic, filled the bowl with red wine, swilled it around to get the last of goodness, and everybody else in the village went glug, 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 as you had to neck the entire bowl full of red wine. Drink responsibly. Don't do that. But it was fun. So there we go. Glug, glug, glug. Malbec, Cahors.
Where is my onion soup?
It's an excellent question. I'm sure we could do it with the beef casserole we had. Thanks, Heidi. So this Cahors Malbec would it would put hairs on your chest, even if you were a lady. It's an early gender reassignment.
What are you? Oh, okay. So yeah, you can mute him. Get rid of him.
Oh, shut up.
So I think this is the thing that Malbec has become very, very famous in Argentina and South America. But France is the home of it. Cahors for this kind of like standalone single varietal Malbec, and also don't forget we've got Bordeaux, where it's a fairly decent component in some of the blends up there.
Increasingly so.
But this has always been that slightly more rustic style, that grippy, that tannic, that chewiness, that it's not something that generally you just sit and have a few glasses of. You definitely cry out for a little bit of food.
You wouldn't
definitely a
mistake
little bit of
this
air
for an
in.
Argentinian Malbec, would you? But you wouldn't say it was a
but-
classic Cahors style.
So I think this is becoming how Cahors can be the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And I think you've seen that with other grapes. Okay, you take something like Pinot Noir. There's Burgundy that is one particular style, and then you go to California, and that's a completely different style. And then you go somewhere like Oregon, it can kind of be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But what you see from this is you've had Cahors has gone to Argentina, and then the Argentinian family has returned to Cahors to go, all right, how can we make a more, and I don't want to say it's not classic because it's from Cahors, it's made well, but a much more approachable style of wine. It's very much like you would expect from the region, but just a little bit round, a little bit. So someone gave it a little hug.
It has, yeah. It's been. Someone says it's a bit thuggy. It's like that thug has been. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger when he goes and is kindergarten cop. It's just softened around the edges a bit. That's this wine. And there...
That's your tasting it. So, on that
I'm
point,
not wrong, though.
So on that point, while we're having a little sip of this, and we kind of put our tasting notes in, we've got a bit of a link here, haven't we? Because you know, Argentinian producers, but we have for those who have joined us for the last few months, we have the lovely people at Al Pasión over in Argentina, and each month they send us a little update of what is going on in their vineyard. So the idea is
brilliant. Just little...
the idea is we can follow them through from pruning to planting to harvest, and we can see exactly what happens through an entire season of vineyard. So recently, and this is really kind of cool because it's not often vineyards get planted or replanted. So they've been doing a little bit of planting in the vineyard. But I'm going to stop talking and we'll go to the video.
Let's see what they're
what's
doing
happening
and come
over
back
in
for the last
Argentina,
wine.
and then we'll come back.
If you want to
for...
move on to wine 6, if you've finished your Malbec, go for it, and we'll get going with that when we come back.
We'll come back with the pairing when we come back.
Fantastic.
Al Pasión.
Hi, my name is Kathy. I'm one of the founders and investors in Al Pasión Vineyard, which is located in the UK Valley in Mendoza, Argentina. And I'm also a member of the online wine tasting club, and I'm based here in the UK. What I'm going to do is to provide you with an update from the vineyard, which we're doing every month. This month, Escael is going to show you some planting that he's been doing in the vineyard. Now this is something that doesn't happen very often once the vineyard's been planted, but this month we've been planting 3 new plots. What you'll see is the land's already been prepared ready and the holes have been dug ready to put the plants in, and then you'll also see towards the end of the film the drip irrigation being installed. You'll hear Escael talking about what he's about to plant, and what you'll hear is that we have a rootstock onto which we graft some vines, and the rootstock he's selected is the Paulson rootstock, which is particularly good for lime soils. So onto the rootstock are grafted clones of the grape varietals that Escael has chosen, and within each different grape varietal there'll be a choice of different clones available, and Escael will have chosen the ones that he thinks are going to have the right characteristics for the type of wine he's trying to make. So, over to you, Escael.
Hoy estamos plantando un cuadro nuevo con la variedad Chardonnay. El material que hemos traído del vivero son macetas de invierno que vienen injertadas sobre un portainjerto Paulsen, y el material genético es un Chardonnay del clon 96. Acá los chicos ya han estado haciendo la tarea de plantación, pero básicamente el trabajo es, una vez que los hoyos están hechos, agregar una dosis del abono orgánico. Se tapa con un poquito de tierra como para que el pan de raíces no quede en contacto directo con ese abono, y luego, una vez la planta posicionada en la línea de plantación, se retapa suavemente, protegiendo el cuidado de no romper las raíces. Estamos por empezar la plantación de un cuadro nuevo de la variedad Cabernet Sauvignon. Estos son los barbechos, como han venido del vivero. Es un barbecho que está injertado sobre un pie Paulsen, y el material genético es un Cabernet Sauvignon del clon R15. Los barbechos ya vienen con sus raíces cortadas a una distancia aproximadamente de 1,5 puños, 2 puños, y han estado toda la noche en hidratación bajo agua. La tarea que ahora hacemos es, en todos los hoyos que ya han estado hechos con anterioridad, ir agregando una dosis del fertilizante orgánico. Se agrega una capita de tierra para que las raíces no queden en contacto directo con ese abono orgánico, y luego se va tapando cada barbecho, y lo ideal es que la disposición de las raíces queden aproximadamente a 45 grados con relación al suelo, para que estas raíces busquen más fácilmente la penetración y la profundidad del suelo, que es lo que le va a dar la vida a la planta. Ya vamos a comenzar con la plantación de un cuadro nuevo de la variedad Semillón. El material que hemos elegido es un semillón de una selección masal que viene injertado sobre un pie Paulsen. Estos son los barbechos como vienen del vivero. Las raíces han sido cortadas a una longitud de 1,5 puños aproximadamente. Estos barbechos han estado toda la noche en hidratación, en agua, y ahora lo que vamos a proceder es directamente a la plantación. Entonces agregamos un poquito de abono, tapamos con una capita de tierra, ubicamos la planta. Lo ideal del trabajo es hacerlo de a 2 personas, una que sostenga el barbecho y la otra va tapando con tierra limpia. Una vez que la planta ya está posicionada, apretamos suavemente y calculamos que quede entre el nivel del piso y el injerto una altura de unos 8 a 10 centímetros. Lo único que resta ahora es regar.
Estamos en el cuartel número 17, Malbec. Lo que estamos observando acá es que hemos hecho un replante de estacas que se sacaron la poda del año anterior. Se embarbecharon y estamos ahora regando y hemos replantado alrededor de 650 plantas en este cuadro.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and to all of your team for that. That was really interesting. There's loads of cool stuff going on. We could probably talk for hours about massal selection and things like that, but we're not going to, because we're going to move on to wine number 6, which is the Famille Perrin. If you want to talk about any of the cool things that you saw there, ask Kathy in the chat. She's right there. So yeah, Famille Perrin, they've got a few different properties, haven't they?
They have. So the Perrin family have been around for a while, but they were not one of the first doing it, but one of the first that really seriously started promoting organic viticulture. This was in the 1950s at a small property that people might have heard of called Chateau Beaucastel, which is probably the house in Châteauneuf-du-Pape.
It's probably
the most expensive wine in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, but really really great wine. So they have this. They started organics in the 1950s, and then they've got these other sites, throughout the Côte de Rhone. And they've also got a winery over in California called Tablas Creek.
Yeah, which is phenomenal.
Absolutely am in love with, and I would move there tomorrow.
Yeah,
and, I might family
you and me
that a
both.
little bit. But anyway, back.
But they are absolutely the cutting edge over there of the sustainability movement as well. And I think now the lovely thing is that both the French and the American sides are learning massively from each other. But this is what they call nature, which is a very
I thought that said nature.
Well, arguably, some say there's some link between the two words. I've heard of it, but here they're going down the line of low intervention, and this is obviously quite a controversial thing because you've got on one hand what people call natural wines. We saw what's her name? Something about Mary Girl, I've forgotten it. Cameron Diaz in the intro with her Aveline, which is clean wine, which doesn't mean anything.
Okay, we're not going down that.
We're not going down
there tonight.
But
People will log off and go
this
home.
is a wine where they have tried to use natural yeast and they've tried to not add any preservatives to it, which means you have to be very, very good at what you do to not end up with rubbish in the bottle.
It's very, very difficult in winemaking.
Oh, we should switch that.
To do nothing and end up with good wine. It's very easy to do nothing. But, you look at a lot of wines that kind of I wasn't aiming
He was
that at you.
going to talk about my Syrah, wasn't he? Because I during the first lockdown, I did a low intervention approach to it, didn't add any sulphur to it, and it started off absolutely brilliant. It was a really, really good wine. And over the months that I was working on designing this packaging and the machine, it went wrong. It didn't like the low sulphur. So it's very easy to make a mistake.
It is, and you know, it's that difference between natural wine and minimal intervention are two very, very different things. You know, a lot of and there's some good natural wines out there, but there's also some awful ones, and it can be a little bit hit or miss, especially with some of the new age winemakers trying to be all natural, and you know, getting that right. You get a lot of
natural things,
and you get a lot of bottle variation. You might love the first bottle and the next one be but these guys do it well. They do it right.
Yeah,
and it's minimal intervention. So if they need to do a little, they do. But it's all organic, and it's organic farming and winemaking, because that's two different things. You can have an organically made wine.
Yep.
And you can have an organically farmed wine. They don't both, and it doesn't necessarily
the other thing is that you can have an organically certified wine, which obviously doesn't. If the certification process is hideously difficult, it involves lots and lots of paperwork and inspections and a long period of time, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing anything better, but it means that we can trust it. But yeah, the lovely thing for these guys is that in the intro video we talked about Le Mistral, which is this wind which comes down, and Dante, I think it was the seventh circle of hell, was wind that never ended, and it drives people in the region completely potty because and they've started putting all the windows and the doors on the southern side of their things because it's coming from the north. So what the people hate, though, and the vineyards have to be really carefully laid out so that they don't necessarily do it in the way that will catch the most sunlight or any of the things that people normally do. They do it in the way that won't get blown down in the wind.
But those winds at 60 mile an hour.
Regularly. 60 mile an hour for days at a time. It's crazy, and it will break your windows and rip through the. But as far as the vines go, this constantly moving air means that stuff doesn't stay stagnant, and that's where you start getting, mildew and things like that growing on your vines. So it's a bit easier to be.
Can you chuck the tasting notes up?
Let's get the tasting notes up. There we go. They are up, I think. Yeah. Marzipan, that's an interesting one.
It has. It's got this kind of almondy, French pan thing kind of going on.
Well, they make lots of that down in the south of France.
Lots of cherry, lots of pepper that you're getting from the Syrah. Your Syrah Grenache blend here. That herbal characteristic from lavender, elderberry. It's some really good tasting notes.
It does have some good fine tannins as well. You're completely correct. And there is a bit of pepper in it. Yeah, and I think that's probably coming from the oak side of things. You can change how much you sort of burn the oak or toast it, as they say. It's whether you like your toast very, very sort of
toasted
light
or bread,
or bread or blackened. But you can change some of those things.
Bread or charcoal.
Where would marzipan be coming from? I can't.
Probably
I can't think
the
of
inside of your Christmas cake.
The amaretto, someone's picked up on that as well. But these are not unpleasant things, and so I'd say they know what they're doing, these guys, because that's a very tasty wine.
That is a very, very tasty wine. And
indeed.
what's great about this is, once again, Côte de Rhone can be some really, really good value, because these guys make Chateauneuf de Pape and they know what they're doing, but they can dive in and do a Côte de Rhone that might not be quite as much money as a bottle of the Chateauneuf de Pape, and it's still delicious. Do we think it's time to vote for wine of the night?
We could do that, couldn't we? We've still got a few great comments coming in, but I'm aware of the time, so let us move it on to the question that we never like, because we often like a lot of our wines, and it seems very hard to pick just one of them. I'm going to turn it off while people vote, but do go off and vote for what you think is the favourite. I think between 5 and 6.
Dan wants to talk.
There's a more accessible one.
Well, everyone's voting. Hannah asked, so when we were chatting about aeration,
Yeah.
so what is the point?
What's the point of aeration? Right. Okay. So the answer to most questions in wine is really annoying, and it is.
It depends what you want.
It depends. There's wine's immensely annoyingly complicated, and so for that particular wine there, they said they opened it up and it didn't change. plenty of them do. Like that rosé will be completely different after a few hours open. But it depends on what chemicals make up those smells. And some of the chemicals are really easy. They react with the air and they get oxidized and they disappear quickly.
And I think with that, and it comes with sometimes, I think sulphur is a big one.
Sulphur's a big one.
So
yeah.
you sometimes you open a bottle of wine, it's got this kind of like eggy, stuffy
eggy
kind of thing
smell,
going on. You go, oh, what is it? And then that happens, I wouldn't say regularly, but for the amount of wine I open, fairly regularly.
Yeah.
But that does what's called they call it blows off.
It blows off, yeah. And that's the the chemical that makes that rotten egg smell is down to the fact the wine's evolved in the bottle. It's changed in the bottle and there hasn't been quite enough air getting into it. So people make different corks that let in different amounts of air and different screw caps that let in different amounts of air. And again, I'm sure Kathy can tell you all about this, but you have to try to pick your closure to match what the wine is going to evolve, and that means forecasting the future, which is hard. But I mean, obviously there is some science behind it. But if you get one of those and you let it aerate, that will just blow off. And the other big ones are, of course, the ones which have got lots of tannins in them, really grippy tannins, and those can evolve over time. That binds with the oxygen in the air and makes it smoother.
So yes, there is 101 reasons why you should have oxygen, and there's 101 reasons why you should not have oxygen.
Put it this way.
And every level of oxygen in between. Microdosing.
It's why my hair is going grey. Oxygen is a real killer.
And why my hair's going grey.
Well, that's also true.
But that's got
undeniably. Or the badgers. No, I didn't say it.
You did. So should we have a quick look at what the favourites were?
Let's see what the favourites were. Yeah, we're going to look in the studio first. Ooh.
That is a surprise.
That's a surprise.
That was not what. Should we put people out of their misery? No, we're not going to tell them.
Anyway, it's been a great tasting. Thank you so much for it. No, go on. Okay. Well, unsurprisingly, the rosé was very, very popular. But it wasn't the best one. It wasn't the favourite one.
And
I would have thought it was probably going to be the Côte du Rhone. But it's not. It's not the Malbec.
You should flip it before people vote. More people vote, and then everything you said becomes null and void. Last minute betting on the stock market.
Quick.
Look,
the Côte du Rhone's going up now.
Look at that. So let's put it up.
Where's it gone?
He's lost it.
There we go.
So Vermentino.
Wine of the night, Vermentino.
What my question is...
Oh! The big blue blanc's going up as well.
The question is, how many people thought on a South of France tasting that a random Vermentino would be their favourite wine of the night? That's kind of cool.
I would have never thought that. It's certainly if you'd called it a roller, I would have even known what you were talking about. I vaguely heard it in
Can I tell you what makes me really much more excited about that being the wine of the night? Can you put the prices up?
Oh yeah, let's see the prices.
So while he puts the prices up and show that everyone's favourite wine of the night was also the cheapest wine of the night.
Yeah. Excellent.
What have we got going on? So we're coming to Christmas. We are coming to Christmas, and next month we are doing a Christmas extravaganza where discoverers meets adventurers and everyone on everything comes together. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a little look. If you subscribe to both, give us a shout. We'll look after you. We'll make that nice. But we're going to do one tasting for Christmas and a big extravaganza for everybody. Next week, if you fancy something Australian, we are doing an alternative Australian. So none of this and more of Grenache and weird things and Durif and exciting things from different regions. Sangiovese, in fact. What else?
I can hear a song coming on there.
No, we cannot hear a song going on. What else is going on? We are doing, I might have mentioned it, that I 3 months ago now, I went and judged with the Independent English Wine Awards. And we are doing a tasting with them. It's a one-off tasting that they're helping out with. You know, the wineries are sorting out the wines for us, but it's a bunch of gold medal winning wines. There's going to be me.
A few silvers in there as well.
There's going to be Alex, and there's going to be Lee Isaacs coming in as a guest host. So you might see a guitar. slightly, just so people who join us, slightly smaller sample. So it's 50ml samples. It's only 5 wines this time.
We might go to the.
No, we won't.
Okay.
No, we won't.
All right. So anyway, look, but we want to get it out in front of as many people.
Get it out
and
in
the
front
problem
of-
was that a lot of these wines, they only made a few barrels of them. Like some of the best wines in the country are made at that small scale.
Really cool, fun, small production space. And also, and then I'm going to stop my sales pitch for the day. If you really like Australian wine and you didn't join us last week, we did
you missed a treat.
We did a special tasting with the wines of Western Australia. Absolutely phenomenal. Some of the best wines that I've had this year. We still have a few of them left available on catch up. So if you fancy doing that, get on the website and get it done.
Did I like the song at the beginning of GBBO?
I think that's Great British Bake Off, but I don't watch it.
I'm afraid so. I don't really watch any television these days. But I'm guessing it must have been related to that. I know that they've got. Is it Matt Lucas on there now?
I'm not sure.
Matt Lucas
And Noel Fielding. Noel Fielding did great songs.
Are we saying they're copying us?
Love to hear more of that. Let me know what it was. I'll check that out. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a fun little trip and lots of reminiscence. So, you know, he when he goes down to South France, he tends to stay in like posh villas and stuff in Saint-Tropez. But you know, I'd go and I would cycle down the mountain and try to pick up 40 litres of wine and try to cycle back up the mountain with 40 litres of wine from the petrol pump in it, and that was not pretty. I stopped halfway because I figured that if I drank the wine, then it would be lighter. And it'd be much easier to get to the top. I'm not sure that logic quite worked, but at least it made me not worry about the pain so much. But yeah, amazing place. Go to South France.
All right, stop. Caroline's in it. Shall we dress the boys up for the Christmas special? No.
Yes.
Okay, Dan is fired. Anyway, actually, no, we need you for the movie. Anyway, we're yabbering on. It's the end of the evening.
They did that song. Brilliant. I'll have to watch that. I'll get on that. Yeah, wonderful. Yes, there may be some elves or Elvis or something. I don't know. Or skiing. Yeah. Guys, I hope you found some good wines. Do go and check them out on the website. And why not get some orders in for Christmas? Because I think that Côte du Rhone or your rosé would work quite nicely with a bit of turkey. Bit of turkey. Fantastic.
That. Anyway, have a great night.
Have a lovely evening, and I'm delighted to say that for once there is no song. But maybe save it for Australia.
Roll credits.
Roll credits. Take care.